am Jamarl Thomas. I am your host. This is the Progressive Soapbox. I've just had an awesome interview with one Mr. George Galloway. Galloway was nice enough to come onto the show. Mind you, begged him for months, but he was nice enough to come onto the show. I absolutely appreciate it. I have the videos. I'm going to upload those once I get the opportunity to do so. We were beset by technical glitches, but Galloway was nice enough to stay. So that was done today. Now, after I finished that, I turned my airplane mode off on my phone, and the first thing to pop up was this. Senate fails to override Trump's veto on Yemen. By all measure, what's taking place in Yemen is a humanitarian disaster. This president came in office saying he was going to be less interventionist. This video is not going to be popular, so I am not going to keep this video necessarily long. There are right many people on my channel that, for whatever reason, find a certain degree of affinity with Donald Trump. Fair enough. In many respects, I can even understand why, especially when given the comparison and the letdown that's associated with the comparison. Fair enough. But it is time for a certain come to Jesus. And I say this with a certain degree of sympathy, as one of those people who used to be in the bag for the Democratic Party and who supported Obama. And I know there's a lot of lefties who would totally understand this thing of disillusionment when you're putting your eggs in a particular basket that is not necessarily what they say they are, or at the very least what you think they are. My point is this. Donald Trump has utterly betrayed his base. I would make this case on a large range of issues, but I want to be very specific on this, particularly around this notion of foreign policy. The neocons have taken control of the car, or the house in this case. The John Boltons of the world, the Mike Pompeos of the world. And unfortunately, yes, and you may hate this, the Hillary Clintons of the world. This foreign policy that Donald Trump has gone down, whether you want to talk about Venezuela or Iran or Russia, this is not the foreign policy that Donald Trump got elected on. This is the foreign policy of, for all intents and purposes, neocons. Bernie Sanders, in the background, was pushing a bill to get the United States out of Yemen. That was the point. Him and Mike Lee. They were using the War Powers Act to force the president to stop. A president that, again, got in office with this notion that he was going to be less interventionist. Obama, back in, I want to say 2008, once he got elected, Obama, I don't even know if he was elected yet, got the Nobel Peace Prize. This was some ironic mockery and almost like a dark comedy. The person who got the Nobel Peace Prize goes invading multiple nations. Now, in the same way that the president before him had destroyed Iraq and has caused all sorts of havoc going throughout the Middle East, this president destroyed his own country, Libya. Nobody cared. The media didn't care. He could sing so well. Look at him play basketball. And he's black. Nobody cared. I even remember one time where they were having this conversation on MSNBC, and Mike Steele, black Republican, and one of the Democrats was using Libya as a positive, showing, this is how Obama does foreign policy, using Libya as a positive, but nobody was really talking about Libya in the media, so people kind of took it as if this was a plus. I was one of those people, and you have no idea the infinite amount of shame I feel for watching that, thinking that this was some kind of benefit on his record. Mike Steele brings this up and says, have you seen Libya lately? Nobody said anything. They just kind of kept it moving. And I thought to myself, how odd that he would bring up Libya. Mike Steele was right. Libya, they're selling black slaves. How ironic. The first African American president presided over an action that allowed other blacks, no, not African Americans, but actual Africans, to be sold into slavery. He got the Nobel Peace Prize. So him running on hope and change and having a populace that is looking for that hope and change, and thought to some degree they were going to get that hope and change from the standpoint of a deviation from the policies that Bush enacted with tweaks, but substance, not so much. In fact, you had a better manager of those policies. Then Trump runs in the election. And Trump, at one point, castigates Jeb Bush for the failures in the policies that his brother ran. The audience cheered him on, screaming at the top of their lungs, yes! A Republican audience, because they wanted something different. I don't have this belief that we're far that divided. I think identity politics causes a certain degree of divisiveness. But if you get into this conversation about economics and everything else, there's a section of the public that is a winning majority. You're not going to get everybody, but the goal is never to get everybody. The goal is to get a winning majority, a coalition. They wanted something different on foreign policy. And Donald Trump was supposedly that something different on foreign policy. And one of the things that a lot of lefties said, even though they didn't support Trump, even though they didn't support Clinton, they said, at least he's going to be different on foreign policy. He's going to be more conciliatory towards Russia. He's going to be less interventionist around the world. The neocons have taken the House, the John Boltons, the Mike Pompeos, and yes, the Hillary Clintons. And you thought you won that election. Yeah, you may have won that election for the short term. But for the most part, if you look at Trump's foreign policy, you can say in some respects, in some cases, he didn't fire off a nuclear war. Fair enough. But inexorably, he has slid further and further into the neocon camp. And for the most part, whatever proclamations he's made of Afghanistan and pulling troops out of Syria and everything else, Boltons, Pompeos have had the run of the house. I'm just saying. And this is another one of those issues. And you even ask, why? Like, understand, Donald Trump is betraying his base for the Saudis. These guys have just executed over 30 people, executed and tortured, some of which were children. And Donald Trump is betraying his base for the Saudis. Look, at some point, all of us in our political life has had to have a come to Jesus in regards to the way we viewed certain political figures. My contention in this channel has been that it's not one or the other, it's both. And I stand by that. And in standing by that, there's something to be said of saying, let me say it this way. I don't castigate Trump in a sense. I have ideological differences with him, but my differences haven't been political, if that makes sense. Meaning they haven't been partisan. I haven't played politics for politics' sake. I've always been earnest in the things that I've agreed with him on, and I've been earnest in the things I've disagreed with him on. And for the most part, you've found me to be ideologically on point. I mean, I haven't just made stuff up to make stuff up to play politics. My issue with Trump is not necessarily the ideological differences, even though that's the issue. It's what you say versus what you do. And in the same way, all of us on the left has had to have this come to Jesus from the standpoint of what Obama would say versus what Obama would do. And I'm saying that people on the right need to have the same awareness, the same come to Jesus with Trump. Do you want less war in the world? And if you do want less war, do you really want to back up a regime that is at this point, us backing them, has killed over 100,000 people? They want to complain about Venezuela. This is literally a humanitarian crisis. And it is one that we have backed. And it is one that it is unsure or uncertain whether they would be able to continue this without the United States backing and assistance on it. So yeah, I consider this an utter and complete betrayal of his base, because let me tell you this, the majority of his base are not on board for this. You go back and watch the video, the outrage that was found when the United States was bombing Syria. The fury and the rage that was in left-wing circles. Look at them pissed off at what Trump is not doing in response to Julian Assange, meaning Trump is going about this way of trying to pull Julian Assange in. Oh, look at the split in the base over that. Yeah, much of his base is not on board for this war stuff, and part of his base, part of the reason that people selected him over Clinton was because they thought he was going to be less hawkish. I made the contention that this is betrayal. I'll end this here. 10 minutes. It's a little too long, but it's okay. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. And by the way, I was one of those people that had no expectations from the standpoint of Trump, meaning I expected Trump to be Trump. I thought he was going to be a Republican, but I was hoping that he would be less hawkish on these things of war. That when he says he's pulling the troops out of Syria, that he actually would pull the troops out of Syria. Or for that matter, Afghanistan. Or for that matter, not engaging in these war crimes with Saudi Arabia. And for that matter, to even not be more hawkish with Russia, which is exactly what he's doing right now. Getting rid of the INF Treaty. Getting rid of this notion of weaponizing space. This is going to be a boondoggle for weapons contractors. This is not what he got elected with. So there will be a lot of people who would turn me off on minute 2, but there's a sliver, a probabilistic percentage of supporters who at the very least hear me, and I'm not telling people to jump in the league with the other party. I'm more so asking them to challenge the notion of the person who they're supporting. There's a difference in those things. I'll end this here. Thanks all.